Let's look at ratios. We use a lot of ratios, especially when it comes down to comparing companies to companies, seeing which is the best benchmark. And by benchmark, we mean what is the top one in the industry as an example for all the rest of us. Or maybe you are in that company, and maybe you are the benchmark for everybody else. But we use this whole aspect of ratio analysis to help comparison between one company versus another. A lot of times where we stand in the actual industry, and a lot of times, especially if you're an investor, what you plan on doing with it. There's four kinds of key ratios. The first one is called liquidity. You already have an idea of what liquidity means. It means how much fast cash does your organization have. Leverage, which is all about debt. Profitability, in other words, how much money you're making and how much turnover you have. And the activity ratios is the turn that you have on the inventory. So we'll talk about them individually right now. We start with liquidity ratios. We want to see the ability to turn assets into cash to pay short-term debts. There's two that are out there. The main one that's mentioned all the time is your current ratio and then your asset test ratio. And we look on the balance sheet to find that. So the current ratio is a matter of that ratio as to how fast you turn your assets over. And the asset test is used by those that are deeply into finance. And so we'll look at that. Then leverage is really about debt. Debt to owner's equity ratio, how much you rely on borrowed funds to actually pay for the operations. That's a ratio that you have, and you compare that to other firms in the industry. If you take the class Digital Investments, I covered this in really detail because really this whole aspect of what ratios that you use is good to analyze where one firm stands in relationship to the others in the industry. When you start looking at debt ratios, when you start looking at liquidity ratios, you have to pay attention to what you're talking about. If it's a clothing manufacturer or clothing retailer, that's one thing. If it's a car dealership or a car manufacturer, it's another thing. When you look at debt, a clothing retailer will have only a fraction of the amount of debt that you'd have to sit down versus the car. A car manufacturing company is going to have billions of dollars in debt because they have to pay for all these huge, gigantic machines. So the debt ratio will be much higher, as well as the liquidity. So you'll see different companies, and you can't apply the same ratio analysis of a clothing manufacturer and a vehicle manufacturer. They're two different industries and not even comparable of the different ratios that you'll see. Then you look at the profitability ratios, and the number one that's always out there, literally listed in every single listing, you'll see EPS. EPS equals, and you'll see the number. It's called earnings per share. And you'll see if it's basic or diluted. That's a big ratio. And we use that all the time when you're involved in the stock market or in any type of equities that you're purchasing. And also, you can look at return on sales, return on equity, but we watch those profitability ratios to make certain that there's growth. And we also want to analyze the management performance. And then one of the key ones you always pay attention to is the activity ratio, which is how effectively management is doing in turning over the inventory. It's about supply chain management. Here, you see this gal here, she's a wait staff member inside of a restaurant. It's critical for her that she has really good turnover. Now, not so much about food. For her, it's going to be a matter of this person over here is occupying a table in her section. She wants them to be in and out in an hour because if she gets them in and out in an hour, somebody else can come and take that person's place. She wants the inventory to go out, inventory comes in, and by the way, she makes a tip off this one, she makes a tip off that one. If she can crank out that table, do 5 turnovers every night in a 5-hour shift, she'll be doing really good because she'll have 5 different tips as well as the hourly wage she's making on top of that. For her, the inventory turnover is a bit critical. For you, inventory is critical as well. If you have goods sitting on a shelf inside of a store and those goods stay there the entire year and you finally sell it, that's nice. If you have that shelf and you sell the materials on that shelf every month, all of a sudden you can turn over the goods 12 times. If you're turning it over every single week, that shelf is cleaned out. All of a sudden now it turns over 52 times. So you'll have 52 times the profit if you did versus the aspect of it turning over once a year. This is a huge number. It depends as to how your goods are turning over and how much money and profitability you're making in the process. Your balance sheet. you'll see a whole series of accounts from cash, accounts receivable, inventory, investments. Then you'll see the liabilities. So these are actually titles of accounts that you'll see listed in your balance sheet as you track your goods. And here's a statement of different titles that you're going to see on your income statement accounts as well. You'll see the revenue, cost of buying goods, cost of storing goods. Remember about the cost of goods sold, and then all your various different expenses that you have as well. So pay attention to your ratios. Look at your liquidity ratios, your leverage ratios, profitability ratios, your activity ratios. There's four major categories. There's always one that really dominates them out there. The two that you're going to really pay attention to if you're buying any kind of stocks or any kind of equities is earnings per share and inventory turnover. Those two play a huge role whenever you're looking at comparisons between industries, when you're looking at different types of investment instruments to determine the value of a company. Take care.